Hello, are you ready to learn for today? Okay, what you will learn for today is all about illustrating, translating, and solving combined variation. So, for today, this will be the last type of variation that we'll be studying. So, ano nga ba itong combined variation? So, para mas maintindihan natin, combined variation is when the direct and inverse variation happen at the same time. So, itong combined variation, para siyang joint variation, pero kasi sa joint variation, it's the relationship between two or more quantities having direct relationship. But in this case, in a combined variation, it describes a relationship where a variable depends on two or more variables or other variables, wherein it varies directly with some of them and it inversely with others. So, technically, coming from the word itself, combined, yun nandun agad yung idea, pinagsamang direct tsaka inverse variation. But in this case, we are talking about three or more different quantities. So para mas madali natin maintindihan, let's try to have some situation having this combined variation. So for example, we have a business plan. Suppose you will create a product for a small business. You may consider these three things. So ano-ano ba yun? First, syempre, ilan yung products na gagawin mo. And coming from that, you also have to take note of the number of materials needed to create those products. And paano ba natin makikreate yung product na yon kung walang capital? Siyempre, kailangan natin ng capital. So, in this case, this is a good example of combined variation. Bakit? As the number of products increases, the number of materials also increases. Siyempre, marami kang gagawin na product, maraming materials din yung kailangan mong gamitin. But at the same time, as the number of product increases, your capital decreases. Siyempre, yung capital mo, yan yung puhunan mo. Habang dumadami yung products na ginagawa mo, nababawasan yung capital mo. So, lumiliit siya. So, if you try to understand, the number of products P varies directly to the number of materials M. So, direct variation siya pagdating dun sa number of materials, tsaka number of products. But when it comes to the capital, the number of products varies inversely to the capital or your capital on that kind of business. So in this case, if we try to combine these two different type of variation, we can create what we call a combined variation, wherein we can say that P varies directly with M and inversely with C. So the number of products P varies directly to the number of materials needed and inversely with the capital or C. So pag pinag-combine natin itong dalawa, these two types of variation, we can create a combined variation that can be interpreted as P is equal to Km over C. So tignan nyo, parang nandyan pa rin naman si K pero pinagsama yung direct tsaka yung inverse variation. So this is what we call a combined variation. So let's try to discuss another example. So let's have a situation having building a house. So yes, we must consider the number of workers. Second, how many days do we have to finish a certain construction of a house? And third will be, what would be the expense? So another situation that discusses about a combined variation. Why? As the number of workers increases, the number of days decreases. Katulad yan diniscuss ko sa inverse variation nung nakaraan. Habang dumadami yung tao, mas umiigsi yung araw para matapos mo yung o para matapos nila yung trabaho. Syempre marami silang maghahati-hati para matapos itayo yung bahay. Now, when it comes to the expenses, as the number of workers increases, your expenses also increases. Syempre, mas maraming tao, mas maraming workers, mas marami kang taong papasahurin. So, mas tataas yung expense mo. Pero ang kagandahan, mas maiksi nga lang yung araw ng paggawa. So, yun yung dalawang type ng variation dito. So, once again, we can say that the number of workers, W, varies inversely to the number of days, D, to finish building a house. So, kung makikita nyo, inverse variation yan. But when it comes to the expense, the number of workers, W, varies directly to the expense, E. So in this case, if we try to combine these two different types of variation, we can have this statement wherein the number of workers W varies directly with the expense and inversely with the number of days D. So, yan yung tinatawag nating combined variation because in reality, ang talagang lumalabas naman, combined variation. Bakit? Hindi lang naman kasi kinoconsider yung expense mo o yung number of days. Marami pang iba. That could also be a direct or inverse variation. So, combination siya palagi sa totoong buhay. So, if we try to combine these two different types of variation, we can have this combined variation W is equal to KE over D. Now, how do we translate a combined variation statement? So, for this given example, let's try to study. So, write an equation for the following statement using k as a constant of variation. Just to give you an example, this is an equation of variation statement for a combined variation. So, the statement says z varies directly to x and inversely to y. So, we interpret it as z is equal to kx over y. So, direct kasi siya sa x, kaya katabi ni k si x and then inverse daw siya kay y. So, nasa denominator siya, di ba? Ganun naman kapag inverse variation, nasa baba ng k yung ating variable or yung ating isang quantity. Now, as we try to have this following example, meron tayong nakalagay dito, A varies directly to B and inversely to C. So, kung titignan mo, meron tayo dito, ito yung tatlong quantities natin, A, B, and C. So, A will now be equal to KB over C. So, kung titignan nyo, varies directly kasi siya kay B, kaya katabi ni K si B. And then inversely to C, kaya katabi, ay nasa ilalim ng K natin yung C niya. So, ganun lang kadali mag-translate ng combined variation statement into a mathematical equation. So, as we continue, let's try to have this second example. Z varies directly as the square of x and inversely as y. So, kung titingnan mo dito, ito yung consider natin, Z. Then, the square of x. So, huwag mong kakalimutan, binanggit the square of x. So, kung i-interpret mo yan, dapat x squared yan kasi the square of x eh. And then inversely as y. So, we can translate this one as z is equal to kx squared all over y. Yan. So, varies directly daw siya to the square of x. So, katabi ni k yung x squared natin and then all over y because it varies inversely to y. So, let's try to have this third example rather. So, the resistance R varies directly with its length L and inversely as the square of its diameter. So, for this one, let's try to consider this R as our first quantity, and the length will be the second, and the third will be the square of its diameter. So, yan. So, square of its diameter, we can interpret this as D, but in this case, square of its diameter daw, kaya naging D squared. Yan. So, how do we interpret this one into a mathematical equation? It's R is equal to KL all over D squared. So, kung makikita nyo, katabi ng K natin is L, and then it varies inversely as the square of diameter, kaya D squared yun nasa denominator. And that's how you translate combined variation statement into a mathematical equation. I hope you understand the lesson for today. Until next time, bye!